Hey everyone, real quick before we get into talking about Twilight Princess, me and my girlfriend are streaming Twilight Princess right now. We do it every Wednesday, sometimes on Saturdays, sometime after 6 p.m. US Mountain Time. She's never played a Zelda game. It's my favorite Zelda game. We laugh. It's a lot of fun. You can find that over on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/thegoldenstylefos. Oh, and also, if you like her stream productiveness and so forth, she also has her own Twitch channel where she streams Red Dead Redemption and stuff that she enjoys. That channel is called Awesome Possum Pie. So far, I think she's only streamed once, but she's probably going to do that more often. So yeah, check those out and enjoy the video. Thanks. Can get a little bit tedious, but I mean, maybe, but not to a point where I'd complain about it, and it's optional content anyway, so like, And I don't mean optional content the way that Breath of the Wild has quote-unquote optional content. In Breath of the Wild, the only gameplay they designed is the shrines, so if you want to get any value out of the $60 you spent on the game, of course you're going to play through them. And if they're all underwhelming and garbage, then it's reasonable to say that they're underwhelming and garbage, and to complain that you had to spend $60 and 5 years waiting for this game just for most of its content to be underwhelming and garbage. However, with Twilight Princess, there's a full game that doesn't have to include the collectibles. And if you find fighting Pose to be tedious, just don't fight the Pose. You can still play through the story and do all of the other interesting things that are in the game without having to worry about collecting all 60 Poe souls. And you can still have a rich, rewarding gameplay experience that feels like it's worth the cost of admission without having to worry about that. And all you're really missing out on is an extra bottle. I mean, the bottle does have the best potion in it, but like, it's just a potion. You don't need it. And I guess people could also say that there's way too many rupees, and at the end of the game you just have more rupees than you know what to do with. And that is a problem in a lot of Zelda games, not just this one. But I feel like it's probably more noticeable here because they included the rupee armor that makes you invincible in exchange for eating up your rupees. Which, you know, is kind of a cool idea, except that it means they had to put a bunch more useless rupees into the game so that you could make use of the armor, and your wallet size isn't that big, so you can't wear the armor for that long anyway, and like, it's not quite as polished as they were going for, I guess. The rupee armor is a cool option, especially if like you want an extra helping hand when you're fighting Ganon at the end. And you do have to spend a buttload of rupees to get it, but it's not a perfect setup. Although I will say that I think the HD remake actually manages to fuck this up more, because they replace a bunch of the rupee chests with stamps for the Wii chat system, which, first of all, no longer exists, because of course it doesn't. It's a Wii U chat system. But second of all, who the fuck was using a Wii U chat system in the first place? Like, seriously. Who needed extra emotes for their Wii U chat system? Who are you? Where are you? What are you doing with your life? Why don't you make better life choices? There are two things that also come up. First is that the game doesn't have enough optional content. I don't think that's true. I think this game has vastly more mini-games and side stuff to do than a lot of other titles. It's just that a lot of it you will do as you go through the main story, because why wouldn't you? This game has 4 different upgrades you can collect for your bombs through mini-games and finding cool stuff in the world. Similarly, there's 2 upgrades for your bow and arrow. There's a special Hawkeye item that you don't have to get, but if you interact with NPCs in the right way, then you can get it. There's a bunch of empty bottles you can find. There's an entire area of the game that is devoted to a fishing minigame. Inside of that area is a second minigame where all you do is roll a ball along a path and make it not fall off the path. And there's literally dozens of levels in that mini game. I've never really gotten that into it, but I watched my dad play through it and he got super into it. There's so many levels there. It's insane. And that's without even beginning to talk about the hidden caves that are kind of the inspiration for Botwa's shrines. And while I've ragged on Botwa for making mediocre shrines be the bulk of its content and not having meaningful rewards at the end of them, In a game that already has a lot of standalone content, adding in these little shrine-like things to go and do on the side is really fun. There's quite a few of them. There's one in Lake Hylia, one in the Hyrule Field outside of Kakariko Gorge. There's one in the northern part of Hyrule Field on your way up to Zora's Domain. That one's an ice block pushing puzzle. That one's fun. There's one right outside of Elden Bridge that is really cool and involves using the double claw shot thing all over the place. So there's a bunch of little optional caves scattered throughout the game that have their own maps and look kind of like a dungeon. They're just not big enough to be a dungeon. There's also the Pit of Trials, making a triumphant return from Wind Waker, and in my opinion it's much better in this game. Mostly because the combat in general is much better in this game because you have control over the flow of combat. But in addition to all of that stuff, and all of the mini games, and all of the other things, there's the holes that you can dig into as a wolf. Now you may not have noticed this your first time playing through the game, but if ever you are as a wolf and you see a circle of objects, turn on your senses and dig in the black shiny spot in the middle of that circle of objects. Sometimes it's like 3 rocks in a triangle, or like a circle of grass with a hole in the middle, or whatever. In any case, you'll drop down and there will be this small room with a clutch of enemies, or maybe like a torch puzzle or something like that, and at the end there's a treasure chest. Some of these even have pieces of heart in them. This also may or may not have been noticed by the general public, but when you play through the game and you get to the part where you have to move the owl statues around to find the letters, each of them is also connected to an optional puzzle with really good reward at the end. Some of them are rupees, some of them are pieces of heart, but they're all like valuable enough to be worth your time, considering how much you actually do use rupees in this game. Like, there's a guy in Hyrule Castle who will ask you for 1,000 rupees and give you a piece of heart when you give him 1,000 rupees. You have to do it in increments of 50, which is kind of annoying, but still. So there are meaningful uses for your rupees and lots of things to do and find throughout the game. One of the only real problems I have with the rupees, and this is definitely something I would change, is the way you get your wallets. You only have 300 rupees available until you get to Agatha for the first time, and that's a long way into the game, and you won't have a whole lot of worthwhile purchases to make up until that point, so it's very easy to just have a full sack of rupees all the way until you reach Agatha. And the second thing is, she doesn't give you your biggest wallet until the end of her mission. Which, considering how many rupees she drops on you throughout the course of her mission, seems like a waste. If I were to do it, I would say that first of all you get an upgraded wallet somewhere else in the game before getting to Agatha. Then she gives you a bigger one the first time you give her a bug, and the first time you give her a complete set, she gives you an even bigger one. And I would probably move the max amount of rupees up to 2,000 instead of 1,200. Actually, it might make sense to move the total even higher than that and still have her give you the biggest wallet at the end of her quest and have it be 3 grand or something. But anyway, there is one other legitimate complaint that people make, and this one I actually share, and it's that playing as the wolf isn't as fun as playing as the human, and there's not enough stuff to do as the wolf to make it as fun as being a human. As a result, me and most other players of the game only go into wolf mode when we absolutely have to, and don't really enjoy our time there all that much. And this is a hard problem to solve because, you're a wolf, you can't use tools and stuff. Of course, most of the complexity of the cool items you got throughout the dungeons aren't going to be available because wolves don't have thumbs. But half the cool stuff you can do as a wolf comes from Midna anyway. So I think instead of only being able to do things that a wolf could do, and a couple of cool things that Midna lets you do, if Midna had a lot more function as a wolf. If every time you collect a few shadow, Midna gets a new power that she can use while she's riding you. And these powers could make interacting with the game as a wolf a lot more interesting. She could get a further power-up from the dark energy thing that gets pulled out of you when you get the Master Sword, and maybe even get one from each of the pieces of the mirror that you pick up. In this way, you would have a lot more things to do in wolf form and a lot more ways to interact with the world, and you could even add puzzles or enemies that are specifically designed to interact with these powers and, make the game a lot bigger and more interactive because of it. And not all of Minda's abilities would have to completely change the way you interact as a wolf in order to make things more interesting. For example, she could have a power that makes you run twice as fast or hit twice as hard or something like that, and that would still feel like a meaningful change to the interaction without requiring you to learn a new button combo or something. I think it would make sense for her to have a mix of passive abilities that improve your wolf powers and active abilities that can be equipped kind of like your dungeon items. Alternatively, since Link's wolf transformation comes from his connection to the Triforce, and since the deities of light that you restore, are also tied to the Triforce, Link could directly get some magic powers each time he rescues one of the light deities. You could even combine these ideas and end up with 12 or 13 unique special abilities for the wolf, some of them passive buffs and some of them active abilities you have to equip, and the wolf could be just as dynamic and interesting to play as the human. Of course, that didn't happen, but should happen in a remake. Instead, the remake gave us a second pit of battles where you have to do them all as a wolf, which, And beyond that, the only thing I would really change about the game is adding more stuff to do. Not because the game is lacking in stuff to do. It has more stuff than any game previously, and more stuff than Skyward Sword. But because it's a great, big, beautiful world full of vibrant characters and a great story, and I just want to spend more time in it. I would love to throw in a couple of optional secret hidden dungeons scattered throughout the game, and maybe some stuff that you can do after you defeat Ganon, so that the game doesn't just roll credits, roll sad cutscene, and then put you back at your previous save point. I mean, you can still have that end scene after you do the post game stuff, where Midna goes away and sad. You could still have those sad final cutscenes after the post game content, and then save the game, and then hey, new game plus. Do you want to play hero mode this time or whatever? That's what I would probably do. I do think the inclusion of hero mode is a good fit, and I do think that some of the amiibo interactions are cool. The Ganondorf amiibo makes the game even harder, which is nice. I usually do my challenge runs with Ordon's sword only, because after you pick up the Master Sword, you don't need it for anything except blowing away the black smoke in the Twilight Realm, and everything else you can just do with the Ordon sword, which does half damage. And so when you stack the hero mode limits on top of that and the Ganondorf amiibo on top of that, you end up with an actually really challenging run, which I enjoy. Although, I'll be honest, I really don't think the HD remake is a significant improvement over the original, and I still play the original more because I like the Wii control scheme, and I really, really hate the Wii U control scheme, because the Wii U only lets you control it with the gamepad, and the gamepad is evil and disgusting and bad. I can and probably will make an entire video about what the Wii U should have been and how just awful of a missed opportunity it is. But yeah, the Wii U gamepad is horrible. Horrible. It's way too big to be a fun controller in any sense of the word. The screen is just bad. There's just I hate it. I hate it. So for that reason, I frequently play on the original instead, even though I do prefer the challenge of hero mode and the interaction of the amiibos a little bit. So yeah, those are the main things with Twilight Princess. I would make the wolf more interactive, and I would add more side content. Not because it's currently lacking, but just because I want to spend more time in this world. Also, because any remake needs to justify its cost and its development time, and adding new content is the best way to do that. Seriously, if you're remaking a game and not adding new content to it, you're just wasting everyone's time and money. I would probably also add more collectibles. The pose souls and the golden bugs are fine as they are, but one, I would want the pose to be a little bit more dynamic because currently you can only fight them in one way and like, eh. But like maybe make them interact with your new wolf powers in some way. But two, I think if you're adding new stuff to a game and making new side areas and all this kind of stuff, there should also be rewards that are worth finding. And you can't really split up the pieces of heart any more than they already have, and you can't really like do anything else that is meaningful with what's already in the game unless you created new dungeon items or new suits of armor or things like that. Now, granted, you could do that. You could easily add in the mirror shield. There's not a whole lot of things that would interact with it, but you could do it. You know, you could throw in a fireproof tunic to match your Zora tunic or something like that, you know. But I mean, like, sure, having, you know, more things like that would be cool, but like you don't really need them, clearly, since they aren't there in the first place. So instead, it makes more sense to have collectibles, and that at the end of getting all the collectibles, you get something you would have value for, you know, like magic arrows or something. I don't know. Yeah, right? Like, have a separate quiver for your ice arrows and your light arrows and your fire arrows, and like, you know, and mini games to collect the new kinds of quivers and things like that. Like, that could work. That could be a thing. Or, you know, maybe you collect a bunch of collectibles and then, you know, it powers up your stuff. Currently, your Gale Boomerang flies around and has wind, but what if it also had the power of ice? And instead of just stunning things, it could freeze them, you know? And that's an idea that's been played around with in a lot of Zelda games. You know, like A Link Between Worlds had this like octopus thing, and all of its babies are missing, and when you bring it its babies, it will swallow up one of your items and upgrade it for you. So that might be a really interesting and rewarding way to implement more collectibles in a game like this. So, you know, instead of having collectibles just for the sake of it, you have them and you get to turn them in to upgrade your stuff, and so like it feels rewarding. And of course the upgrades would be optional because you don't need them for the base game, obviously, since they aren't there in the base game. But having more dynamic and interactive combat would be great. There is one more legitimate complaint that this game gets, and I do kind of agree with. Because there are so many great dungeon items, and so many of them are new, some of them don't get utilized very well. You know, like, you never need the slingshot after you get the boomerang and the bow and arrow, and while the ball and chain is useful in combat, kind of, it's a little slow, but whatever. There aren't really a whole lot of places outside of the dungeon it was made for where you can use it for puzzles. Same thing kind of goes for the spinner, right? Like, it kind of makes you able to go faster over certain areas, but you have to interact with these rails, and there aren't these rails in most places. And so, like, there should have been a few more things that use these items in some way. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. I can only think of, like, 3 areas outside of dungeons where you use the spinner at all. There should be more places where you can use them. Now, granted, all of the items are used in the final dungeon, except the slingshot. That's not really used at all. But, you know, everything else has its place in the final dungeon, and I think in general there are ways that you could make the other items more useful. For example, the dungeon where you get the ball and chain is in a frozen area, and the main purpose of the ball and chain is to break ice. So if you just expanded the frozen mountain region and gave more explorable stuff in there, then naturally more of it would have ice that you can break, and these big ice enemies that you can break, and that kind of stuff. Same thing kind of goes for the spinner. You get it in an area that is at the end of a desert, and its main use is to travel over uneven terrain like sand or to attach to the rails. So if you could build in some rail puzzles in the desert area, that would be thematic and appropriate and would give you some reason to stick around in that area after completing the dungeon. So yeah, all the game really needs are some slightly better polish in certain areas like that where they had an idea and they implemented it a little bit but didn't quite go as far as they should with it. And you know, like the rupee thing and the wolf thing, like, just finish some of these ideas that seemingly were left on the cutting room floor. and then add some new content just for the fuck of adding new content to a great game, and then call it a day. I don't hate the Twilight Princess HD remake as much as I hate several of the other Zelda remakes, but it still falls woefully short of doing what it should. It does have some improvements. The quick change wolf button is kind of nice, but also kind of whatever. Um, and like the amiibo functionality is a nice addition, but it means you have to use the Wii U gamepad, which is bad, and things like that. So it has some good ideas, some bad idea, but I think it could be done a lot better if we wanted to do it again. So yeah, that's the Twilight Princess remake. What it should have been, what it could be, I suppose. There's not a version of it on Switch, so that's so dumb. There shouldn't be. It's fine. But yeah, thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next life. Laters. Hey, thanks for watching that video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, all that stupid YouTube crap. Also, you can find me on Twitch at the Golden Stalfos, obviously. On Wednesdays, me and my girlfriend stream playthroughs of games she's never played before, and that's a lot of fun. And on other days, I will sometimes randomly do a challenge run or something if I'm feeling like it. You can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter to make extra sure you get video notifications. And I have a Patreon, if and only if you have money to burn. But to be fair, if you have money to burn, you should also consider some charities. There are always a few linked in my description, just in case. Oh, and be sure to leave positive comments down below for my girlfriend who volunteered to edit my videos for free because she's awesome. And yeah, thanks for watching.